Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. As I said in my speech a few moments ago, this is a day of celebration, but soon the celebration will be over and it's time to get to work. And as I also said, there's only one way that we ought to measure the performance of the legislature, and that's what we got done. And I know that the people, my colleagues, are responsive to the idea that we need to get off to a fast and aggressive start. We need to demonstrate that the legislature and all of state government can solve the people's problems. And so while we grapple with this historic budget crisis, which we will, we are also going to set a positive agenda for California. We're gonna achieve children's health care. We're going to pass a comprehensive bill that establishes the most aggressive renewable energy standard in the world, and we're going to get a water bond done. And we're going to try to come together on economic stimulus. So let me talk about economic stimulus for just a moment, because I know in some ways it is the centerpiece of the package that the governor has put forward. I know he just issued his call for a special session, Prop 58 special session. I think that's a very important and good idea that he did so. A couple of things about economic stimulus. We need to get this bond money out. But you know what? The existing bond money we cannot let in California until we convince the bond holders that we are serious about making a dent in this budget deficit. Plain and simple. Economic stimulus won't matter if we don't make the necessary cuts and raise the sufficient revenue to give bondholders the confidence that California's credit is good. And so I think there's a little bit of a danger of getting caught up in a whole lot of controversy about issues that aren't directly related to the budget. And I want to make sure in the first instance that we are focused on the budget. Second thing about economic stimulus. We need to, I think, move beyond some of the old arguments about, organized labor versus what's good for business, or the environment versus business. We can both stimulate the economy and have a clean, good environment and protect the rights of working people. I cited an example in my speech. I mean, you have a company that is willing to build a major auto manufacturing plant in San Jose. And they need a loan guarantee. That's what we ought to be talking about, and that's what we ought to be doing around economic stimulus. Getting the monies and the resources we have at our disposal that aren't related to the general fund to spur that activity and to create new jobs. And so the message today from me is that we have to both manage crisis, but we need to think ahead. I know many of you or some of you have written about the whole issue of education and career technical education, and I'm very, very serious about the long-term charge to reform middle and high school education and to create career pathways for every young person, and to tie our future public investments, whether they be bonds, tax credits, or direct investment, to give incentives to private entities and public agencies that are willing to actually link back and partner with public educators to provide those career pathways to young people. So I'm ready to get started. Let's go. That's okay. No, I don't want to repeat my whole speech from earlier this morning, but go ahead.
About the old arguments, and yet the governor very specifically proposed and renewed the proposal today for some what he considered to be economic stimulus. So things about lunch breaks and 8-hour days and all. You know the list as well.
Yes, I do.
You seem to, in your comments, say reject that whole idea, and yet he said he would not have signed your budget last week because it didn't have that sort of thing.
Well, once again, I think that it is very easy to get distracted by issues which aren't directly related to the fiscal crisis at hand. No matter what we do, however you define economic stimulus, and whatever we do in that area over the next week, month, or several months, will make no difference unless we make the requisite cuts and raise the necessary revenue in order to make a dent in a $28 billion problem. So look I've always said, and I said it in the November negotiations, Democrats and Republicans are not wise if we take anything off the table absolutely. We shouldn't be doing that. We're in the midst of a crisis. So let's figure out what the negotiating parameters are. Let's sit down and let's figure out a way that we meet the bottom line, which is to make a big dent in the problem. You know, the one thing about all these other discussions about spending caps or repeal of labor law, not only in my view are they not good ideas, but there has been no demonstration that they bring a single vote of the minority party to solve the problem. Where are the votes?
Weren't you very close to a deal in the Big Five or Big Five and a Half, or however you describe it, on something not too dissimilar from what you put on the floor last week, but it didn't have the sort of things that the Republicans want, like a ballot measure on a spending cap or these other, what they consider to be economic stimulus measures?
No. No, there's a huge difference between what is discussed inside the governor's conference room and then what gets played out in public. I think that there was a common recognition in that room that this is a situation which is urgent and grave. But that's different from saying, under these conditions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that we will vote for additional revenue, for additional taxes that are absolutely essential in order to mitigate even more severe cuts to public education, healthcare, and infrastructure. And so there's a difference between the theory and the actual willingness to put up the votes. And never during any of the discussions that I participated in, either privately or publicly, was there any indication of what conditions it would take for members of the Republican Party to put up the minimum number of votes to get the deal done. And that's what we need. We need a clear articulation in the public setting of their bottom line. Now, their bottom line may not be satisfactory to us, but then that's how a real negotiation begins. That's how we really move towards closure. But you can't do it if you don't know what the actual list of conditions are.
For the legislature to reconvene in December, be here for a couple of days, have a couple of parties, and go home until January. What is your intention? Are you going to keep the Senate in session continuously until this thing is resolved?
Yes.
Every day working?
Well, I anticipate that we will be back in actual session in December. I'm not ready to announce any kind of a schedule. But in the same way I felt about getting something done in November, I feel even more urgency to get something done in the month of December. The treasurer, the controller, all the economists and the financial experts have told us the stark facts. We run out of cash sooner rather than later. We can't begin to get that economic stimulus money out the door unless we convince Wall Street and we convince the bondholders that we, in fact, make a dent in the problem. So absolutely committed to being here in December, not yet ready to announce its schedule.
Senator, you heard what the governor did today. Can you tell us how did he change the debate between the debate we had a few days ago to the debate today? What difference did what the governor did today? What difference did it make? Did he offer any new ideas, in your opinion?
Well, I just have read the press release. I mean, look, the one thing I will say for the governor is that I can say many good things about him, actually, but one of them is I do think he genuinely wants to solve the problem. I do. I mean, he's willing to consider taxes. He's willing to consider additional revenues. And so, I view his announcement today and his proposal today as, the opening of and essentially the continuation of a discussion that's already taken place over the past 3 weeks. We just have to come to closure. We have to come to closure on this. Folks, there really is no choice. It's not as if failure is an option. It really isn't. Because nobody, I don't believe anybody, Democratic leader, Republican leader, any member, wants California to go off a cliff. So how we get there exactly, what the Republican position is on what it's going to take to raise revenue, because I hope that the most basic fact is exposed. Nobody will stand behind $20 billion or $28 billion worth of cuts. Nobody. Neither Democrat nor Republican. They won't stand behind that level of cuts because they know that that would harm the people they represent in very, very significant ways. And so there are only two ways to balance a budget, especially after a decade of borrowing our way out of problems. And that is you either cut or you raise more revenue. We're willing to cut. We put $8 billion of cuts on the table. Painful. I didn't come here to cut public education or health care. But in the end, there needs to be additional revenue. And we are going to figure out a way to get it, and get it sooner rather than later.
In that, just following up on that for a moment, I mean, in that notion that people genuinely want to solve the problem, it helps if everyone can agree on what the problem is. And one of the things that we're hearing from legislative Republicans a lot lately is, why aren't we looking toward the ideas in the California Performance Review that were never implemented? Why aren't we looking at some other ways where we can allow government to work in a better way?
Well, it's my answer to that question is the same answer I give about $20 billion worth of cuts. The rhetoric is different from the reality. I announced today that we are going to begin, and it's not a day too early, a real effort to bring back legislative oversight to the California State Senate. And we're going to do so by focusing on outcomes. It's really the work of California Forward. You've seen it. They say the only way we're ever going to begin to instill confidence that the taxpayer dollar is, in fact, working for the people is to demonstrate what outcomes the taxpayer dollar is bringing in the programs and in the investments that California makes. And so we're very serious about that, but it is not an answer to say, well, government just needs to be more efficient, therefore we're not going to solve the problem. The only choice we all have to make, Democrats and Republicans, is to in fact make a choice. See, what goes on around here and what has gone on for way too long is the lack of a choice. Borrowing has sort of, paved it over in pretty ineffective ways. But we have not forced the debate in a way that requires the real choice to be made. And in the end, the real choice is cuts or revenues. We know we have to cut, but no one will cut $28 billion. The only other way to make that up is revenue. We need to raise the revenue in a way that is of least harm to the economy and creates a sustained and ongoing source of revenue. So we're going to do that. We're going to find a way, and we're going to do it.
Just to follow up on an earlier question, seems like the Republicans really are zeroing in on these benefits for businesses with regard to overtime pay, lunch breaks.
Right.
You said that you don't think any idea should be off the table, but can you say specifically, are you willing to consider those ideas if that's what it takes?
Well, I'll say this. I don't think that those are great ideas. I just don't. I believe in the 8-hour workday. I don't think CEQA is the enemy here. I just passed a landmark bill, SB 375, in which we worked together, builders and environmental leaders and affordable housing advocates in cities and counties, to find the right way to look at CEQA and to encourage infill development. But I don't believe that CEQA is the enemy, and it's a false choice to say it's either CEQA or the economy.
What if that's just what it takes to get a budget?
Well, Tell me that that's what it takes to get a budget deal, and then we'll tell you what we think it'll take to get a budget deal, and then you start a real conversation. But this, what has gone on over the past years, has been a non-conversation conversation. We haven't forced our policy-making body responsible for balancing the books to make the choices. We're going to present the choices, and once we know what the minority party, which holds the stick in a way, because of the 2/3 supermajority vote requirement, once we know what their position is, and a position that's actually consistent with solving the problem, then we can begin a real negotiation.
If our attitude is we're continuing saying, you come to us, we're not going to go to you. We're not going to present that position. You have to.
Look Dan, I will work. I will work day and night. I'm the guy from Sacramento, so I'll be hanging out in my office a lot. Got no place else to really go. And we're ready to talk anytime, any place. But to get to the heart of your question, if that's the way the negotiations, so to speak, is to be conducted, I don't think it'll work.
I just don't see the difference between this session and last session. I still hear gridlock. I still hear partisanship.
It's the first day of session, isn't it?
That's what I mean.
I didn't experience a bit of gridlock this morning. I thought it was all very upbeat, and people were, even Senator Cogdill got up and made some nice comments about my speech. Look, there is no choice but to solve the problem. And you know what? You're right to say prove it. You're right. So let us go about proving it. And then let's get on to health care. Let's make sure that we reform the healthcare delivery system and we point towards the governor's vision of universal health care for all. But let's start with kids, and let's start with prevention. We've got a friend in Washington, D.C., Barack Obama, and a Democratic Congress that wants to make kids' health care their priority. There may be a lot of money that comes down our way. We can get water, renewables done. I'm going to shake up the budget process. I don't know if anybody heard that today, but every member of the Senate's going to sit on the budget committee. I heard that. Yes, I warned them.
What does that do, though? What does that do, though?
What does it do?
What does that
I'm not promising a miracle here, but I can tell you this: everybody needs to own the challenge here.
Do you think the Big Five is the best way to negotiate a
No,
budget? Or you
I do not. I do not. I think the Big Five has its place. I'm always willing to participate in any kind of a venue, but one of the purposes of last Tuesday's session, which I know you called a drill, but I consider doing our job, is that we need to take the debate out to the floor and to the public. And that's why I want to do the committee of the whole. It shouldn't be just a handful of senators that are working on budget. We all own the problem. We need to act like it.
Would you publish the budget for 24 hours before holding a vote?
Yes. Sure. I mean, I believe in public notice and giving people the chance to see what they're voting on. Absolutely.
Can you talk about,
Samantha?
the 2/3 requirement that you mentioned, and how difficult or what's changed from last session to this session, and do you think you'll have an easier time?
Oh,
Maybe getting a few Republicans.
none of this is going to be easy. No easy time. But there's no choice but to get it done. Because we're not going to see California go off the cliff. We're not going to do it. Not going to happen. Not going to happen under my watch.
Darrell, you're here on December 1st.
Yeah.
Fast forward 2 months. 1st of February, the state's going to run out of cash 1 month. You need several weeks just to get the RANs floated.
Correct.
Are you waiting for them to blink and they're waiting for you to blink?
No. I've talked to Dave Cogdill over the holidays. I'll be talking to Dave Cogdill every day. I'll be talking to Karen Bass. I'll be talking to Mike Flines. I'll be talking to the governor. And, the one thing about me, I'm not promising anything except that I'm a grinder. I mean, I don't just show up to a meeting, it falls apart, and come back in a couple of days. I'm going to be at this every day. Going to be at it every day.
Thanks, everybody.
Kevin?
Just a question about the revenues.
Yeah.
Are you still favoring the VLF as the primary source of revenue? And do you believe you have to find additional new revenue sources given that you have another month that went by without any budget changes?
Probably. And yeah, we put the VLF up for a reason. I know it's not popular, but it was 2% for 50 years from 1948 to 1998. It's also a growing source of revenue. But again, if the Republicans have different or better revenue ideas, we're wide open.
Are you open to the possibility of cutting more than $4 billion to schools over the next couple of years?
Well, I do not relish that prospect, but let me tell you something. If we passed the package that was on the table last Tuesday, we would only make about a $17 billion dent out of a $28 billion problem. Important dent, but more work to do. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.